Hello, Councillor Steer, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thumbs up.
Hello, Councillor Steer, can you hear us? Oh,
Yeah, I can hear you guys. You're not able to pick me up.
all right, that's 1 second. I'm just gonna fix that. That's over here.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4:30. I'd like to call the District of Tofino Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And I'd like to first acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be covered on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And if there's no opposition, I'd like to recommend that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229-2016, as amended, that the October 3rd, 2022 regular meeting to be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall, 121 3rd Street in Tofino, British Columbia. And lastly, that the meeting today must adjourn by 6:30 p.m. due to the Monday night movies. So if there's no opposition, I would like to recommend that the October 3rd, 2022 Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. Seeing none, then we adopt the agenda. And if there's no opposition, the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held August 15, 2022. That we recommend that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held August 15, 2022 be adopted. And seeing no opposition, those minutes are adopted. And Ms. Best, item 5 in regards to public comment on the agenda items for today. Do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair Thicke. Currently, we do not have any participants signed up for the public comment period. However, seeing how we have 2 new members of the public attending this evening, I would like to pause for a moment to remind everyone to use the Q&A function in the Zoom window if you would like to be put on the speakers list. So I will call once and I will call twice. And seeing no notifications, we have no comment period.
Thank you. And moving on to item 6, I believe we have a delegation from Caleb Harding from the Wickaninnish Community School, who is the Wickaninnish Community School Coordinator, regarding an update to council. And I believe this is a delegation request from Councillor Steer. So welcome, Caleb, if you're in the Zoom room.
I'm just gonna move the video to Mr. Harding here. Okay, Mr. Harding, we can see you.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
I think we're having a little trouble here. Can you just try again from the beginning, Caleb? And
Sure.
you have up until 10 minutes whenever you are able to start.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
No.
Can everybody, I've got a thumbs up from,
No sound, Caleb. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can't hear.
We cannot hear you.
Okay,
It's very
Try
bizarre.
again.
Looks like Nikki's.
It doesn't seem to be an issue on our end. Councillor Steer, can you do a mic check for us?
I can hear
Oh.
I can hear Mr. Harding from my Zoom in.
hey, Tom, if you could pass on the message, I can hear you just fine and I can hear council.
Yeah, I'll pass it on.
Interesting.
Council.
I have no
I
idea.
can read what he's saying.
Yeah, so I'm
through
not
the-
sure what's going on here. 1 second, please. Just have a,
Through the chair,
Sorry, Caleb, we're just checking things from our end.
Through the chair, can you hear me at this point?
I'm gonna have to ask for a 2-minute recess just to restart this meeting. I'm not sure why. There's a sound issue from our end here. All of the things are speaking to this being working. So one moment, I'm just gonna unplug here. We heard that. Bring if something has been unplugged. That's fine.
Now we're just going on. Couldn't we hear, we could hear Tom, though, couldn't we?
Yes. But then we need to, when you might check, we can.
Okay, Caleb, can you speak again, please?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I
All
think
right,
it was
there we go.
right there, so.
Very good, thank you. Caleb.
All right. And then I do have some slides to provide. Is there any way to share my screen?
Of course, I've made you a panelist, so you can just do that automatically.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to find that function on the Zoom.
It should be a share screen option in the bottom center. Got a little green arrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, and thanks for the patience there getting this all set up. Can everybody see the slide okay? Well, yeah, so yeah, like I was introduced, yeah, my name is Caleb Harding. I'm the community school coordinator with the Wickaninnish Community School Society, and just thought it would be a good time to come in and give a bit of an update about the programs that we've been offering over the past year or so, especially after some conversations with Councillor Steer at our last couple board meetings. So for those that do not know, the Wickaninnish Community School Society was established in 1995. And our mission is to facilitate educational, recreational, social, and cultural activities that enhance the quality of life for all community members. The WCSS operates with one full-time staff member, which is myself, and then we rely on seasonal part-time staff, contractors, and volunteers to facilitate the rest of our programs. We're funded through grants, subsidies, donations, and some program fees, but the majority through grants and subsidies. For us as a nonprofit society, our strength really lies in our flexibility. We're very small and lean, but we have a lot of opportunity to deliver programs in really unique and niche ways. And we also have the a really strong capacity for fundraising. So one of the major things that we do offer at the community school is after school programs. We really want to make sure that that space is not just somewhere kids go for a few hours a day and then it's all locked up and the lights are off after school hours. So we do offer after school programs from Monday through Friday. There's free snack and supervision for all students between dismissal and their programs. We have free bus and boat transportation home for students, including 52 Indigenous students this past year. For our programming that we offered after school, we had 328 students in 49 programs last year. We also had about 20 students drop in for our weekly youth hangout. And with our after school programs, we're really able to unlock some grants and money from community partners that is offered for free programs as well for families, like our Central Dialect program, Tofino Nature Kids, Sports and Games, and more. Last year, we also received quite a few donations from private families that allowed for the purchase and sewing of our school regalia, which you might have seen used in the past few assemblies we've had at the school. We've also been able to provide plenty of indoor recreation opportunities for students after school, particularly in those cold winter months. One thing that we are able to offer with the help and support of the district is community youth programs. So these are programs not just for students that are registered at the school, but any youth in the community. Any youth in Tofino and surrounding areas are encouraged to join these programs. We run them Monday through Friday from about 4:30 until 6. In the past year, in 2021 to 2022, the District of Tofino funded $11,300 for community youth and adult programming. This has included our youth hangout I talked about a little bit earlier. We had like tons of programs running, and on Friday we had 2 programs instead of just the one we'd have on Monday and Thursday. All in all, over the course of the year, we had 7 programs running a week for community youth. We had a little bit of a late start because of some of the COVID-19 restrictions and the circuit breaker closures, but eventually we were able to get some programs up and running. Particularly our youth basketball program was really successful, and we were able to even have the year culminate in a game against Tla-o-qui-aht, which was the first game played in the gym since the pandemic. These programs are really, really crucial for youth. Were really crucial for youth, especially during those earlier years of the pandemic when there weren't a lot of other opportunities for indoor recreation. We have adult programs that run as well. These are from about 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night. The gym was available last year from November 10th until June 4th. Again, late start because of those COVID restrictions. However, this year we are starting much earlier. We had programs running the gamut from racket sports, indoor soccer, a ladies gym night, and 2 evenings of basketball. Over the course of the months that we were open, we had approximately 610 visitors to the adult gym programs. And of course, there were some closures with like statutory holidays. We had the gym being repaired for a while, COVID restrictions and all that sort of thing. Just to bring us up to speed as to what it looks like today, the funding from the district allows us to continue offering community access to the Wickaninnish school gym throughout the year. Our community youth programs have started 6 weeks earlier than last year, while the adult programs will start on October 13th. We have fewer COVID-19 restrictions and no additional forecasted gym upgrades. So that should allow for fewer gym closures this year. We're currently working with the district staff on the 2022-2023 agreement, and that will provide access into June this year as well. Another thing that was really great from last year is that the district funding was able to eliminate the need for a drop-in fee for our community youth and adult programs. As a result, visitors were or had fewer barriers to accessing indoor recreation across the all those programs throughout the year. That's it for my slides. I have some time available for questions if there are any.
Great, thank you very much. That's really informative, and thank you, councillors, there for bringing this forward. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Bellinger.
I have a question. Thanks, Caleb or Mr. Harding. It's great to see that, and the numbers are actually surprising to me in a really good way to see how many both youth and adults attended those programs. So thanks for sharing those details. And my question is, where can community members find a program guide or more information about how to join these programs?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a variety of channels. We do have social media under the same name as our society. All of our after-school programs go out with our master list of families that are enrolled at the school. For the community youth programs, we do send out our guide through the Chamber of Commerce, and I also work with TFN so that they have access to those programs through their channels as well. There's also, if anybody needs physical copies, there's plenty in my office available for dissemination.
Great.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Councillor Anderson.
My question was about the youth programming. Is that open just to students of Wickel Elementary, or is the youth drop-in and some of the other programs open to the high school age students?
Yeah, so for our community youth programming that runs from 4:30 until 6 in the evenings, we've made that open not only to elementary age students, but also the older students and those that are attending the high school. We want to make sure that we have plenty of opportunities for that age range as well. Most of our after school programs are weighted towards those younger ages.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Steer, any comments, questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to really give a great shout out to Caleb. He's done an incredible job in the last year and a half, and certainly through the COVID restriction period, in ensuring he's really put the students and youth at the forefront of the work that he's been doing, and through what I would just can only say have been some challenging circumstances. So I really did want to give a big shout out to work that he's doing there with limited resources and making the most of those resources in this time. So thank you, Caleb.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. I had one comment and question. As I was around in 1995 when we applied for that first grant, and so it's really nice to hear your summary almost 20 years later, and to see all the ups and downs that the school has been through. But I'm very thankful for what you're bringing forward. And I really, as Councillor Steer said, I think you've really navigated this quite well. One comment I heard from a community member not so long ago, actually it was just a few days ago, was this communication, perhaps I could call it a gap between the community school and the community. And she noted that she felt that there wasn't very much, I suppose, cross-pollination or just awareness in the community. Perhaps, I think she was referring mostly to the evening adult programs. So that's just a question I bring forward is there a way that the district could perhaps help you in getting that information out about the, especially those Monday to Friday, 7 to 9 time slots? I hear what you're saying about social media, but a lot of people who are older may not be on social media or choose not to be on social media. So just noting that seems to be a gap, at least noted from 1 or 2 community members, and somehow alluding back to what Councillor Challenger said, could we somehow put those ideas, get those notes out there, get those programs out there, so people, especially, I think it's fabulous that you say you're starting October 13th, and so we just seem like we're moving forward in a really positive way. So I'd love for more people to be able to access that gym facility in the evenings.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. It's something we can work on, is getting that information into more hands. I know for myself, I get a lot of people asking me about those programs while I'm in the aisles at the grocery store, at the co-op. We have put some physical copies of those programs up on like the bulletin boards around town. And but there's also some things we could do to work with the district as well to get that out there. So that's something I could brainstorm with Hillary as well.
Great, thank you. Anything further? No.
Councillor Steer.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Steer, you had another comment, question?
Yeah, I think Caleb just answered it. I think communication with Hillary at programming at the district in terms of it could also go out into our guide as well. Just a quick note in there. That's just one small possibility. And I'm wondering if the ability with Talk Tofino, maybe that might be another avenue for just another channel to be able to get information from the district's ability to get information out.
Thank you, Caleb, and I just encourage you to keep these maybe semi-annual reports coming back to us, so we know where the difficulties might lie, or if there's problems with people or agreements or funding. Please keep us informed. I really I found this wonderful just to hear your record of what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And yes, we will take you up on that.
Great. So moving forward to correspondence, I don't believe we have any for today's meeting. Am I correct, Ms. Ness? Thank you. And moving into presentations and reports. We have item 8.1, which is permission to proceed, and I believe we're going to have a report from Mr. Baker. Am I right?
Yes,
Yes,
I'm in the right room.
you're in the right room, and we're happy to have you. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Council. Thanks for your time this evening. So tonight we are going to talk briefly about the general bylaw enforcement policy and just a few slides to go over for us today. A little bit of background. So the general bylaw enforcement policy was first adopted in May of 2009. Its most recent and only amendment to that bylaw was May of 2012. And staff feel that the current bylaw or current policy inaccurately reflects how bylaw enforcement is administered within the municipality. And some minor housekeeping amendments are required in order to update the language of that policy. So the biggest example and primary reason for the changes, I think, is this one right here. The current wording at the beginning of this policy does say that the District of Tofino will undertake a proactive approach to bylaw enforcement within the constraints of available staffing and resources. That wording probably comes as a surprise to most of the public and maybe to folks in this room, because for many years we have understood it to be the opposite way. Majority of the bylaw enforcement that does take place in the community is complaint-based or concern-driven, and staff are recommending a rewording of the policy to reflect that current practice. The suggested changes, so looking at the idea of the District of Tofino will undertake a complaint or concern-based approach to bylaw enforcement, with exceptions being made for specific bylaws that council has identified as priorities. Example, short-term rentals a couple of years ago, that was an identified priority by council, and it has been a very proactive approach since then. Another one might be vehicles used for camping. It might be off-leash dogs, those sorts of things, where council has a chance to review feedback from the community, talking amongst yourselves, identify what you would like to see as a priority. This creates clear direction for the enforcement staff, and it provides the opportunity for council to review and update the priorities annually, which at this point is something that we don't necessarily do. We hear feedback through various meetings and that where topics come up generally through correspondence, but this may provide that opportunity to actually sit down and have a session where we can sort out what the priorities might be for the year. And then that allows for better alignment with the financial planning process as well. Other changes are primarily considered housekeeping changes, so updates to the general language, identifying the methods or processes of filing a complaint or a concern, as well as the methods and processes for responses to those concerns. And then our recommendation this evening is that staff receive permission to proceed with the policy amendments that would update the language used and clarify complaint or concern-driven versus proactive approach to enforcement based on council priorities. Questions?
Yeah, thank you
You're welcome.
for your presentation. And perhaps as we have not received this information until now, it might take us a minute to just think and digest. Is there any comments or questions? Councillor Anderson?
I'm just wondering what process will sort of happen if we approve permission to proceed. Will that will just be the bylaw department developing a report for council, or will it be whatever, maybe a broader range of staff? Would it involve a consultant? What form will the process take of?
Yeah. At this point, we do believe that this would be a fairly straightforward and simple process because the structure of the bylaw and the majority of the content is there, and it's set up in a way that this is mostly simple amendments. The primary case just being the wording of proactive versus complaint-based. So it's actually very minor changes, and so been working with the director of the community services. We've had a couple of meetings on it. So potentially, if permission to proceed is granted this evening, the report and the draft of the policy could be back as early as October 11th.
Just one more question on that. I'm wondering if any sort of review will take place and comparing it, I don't know, with other municipalities or other language that's used, but we have our bylaw. I'm not really sure when and how it was developed. I'd like to know a bit of that background actually, but I would prefer if we had some sense of the context of these language changes and some comparisons to how that works in other places. So yeah, maybe that's more of a comment than a question.
Councillor McMaster.
I agree with it, changing the wording to reflect what's happening today. But I know, talking in the community, that a lot of people want to see more proactive bylaw. So I'm almost hesitant to change the wording, and then the new council would want to flip back to the original wording. So
I can understand that. I think what this allows is there are so many activities that may require enforcement. There are far more things going on than is possible to be consistent across the board with all of those infractions. So by leaving it worded the way it is, that we are a proactive approach, gives the impression that we are actively going after everything and not necessarily waiting until it is an issue for somebody, which may leave some people feeling it says it's proactive, but they don't seem to be doing anything. By changing the language and having it be complaint-based, concern-driven, that still continues to operate in the way that it has been since I've been in this role in 2016. My understanding right from the start was it was complaint-based until there was an announcement made by the previous mayor that we were now going proactive on short-term rentals and things like that. So I think changing the wording reflects the way the majority of the community actually sees it, although they may wish that it was different. But this actually aligns with what the practices are now and have been for quite some time. But it allows that opportunity for council to take the feedback from the community and identify these are the things that we really do want to be proactive. And that clarity is really important for the staff so that 1 week they don't feel like this is the priority of the week. The next week it's this one. Based on what's changing within the community. So I think it allows an opportunity to be more strategic and then identifying priorities. There may be a human resources finance implication to specific priorities. So if we do this strategically, it allows us to say, okay, we hear that concern and that focus. And now we've really looked at it, and this is what that might look like financially with the staffing ratios in order to deliver that. And then opportunity to have further discussion of, is that going to be feasible or not? So that's the approach that we're looking at it right now.
thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm happy to see this. I think, when councillors' questions are answered and it comes back, I think I'd definitely be in support of this, especially noting that it will help council focus on priorities and fund those bylaw to do that, as well as do everyday reactive bylaw, I guess it would be. So thanks.
Yeah, Councillor Chalmers.
Like I'm in support of it. I think it sounds quite simple. My one question is regarding, I think being able to have the proactive for the ones that are identified, especially within the strategic plan. Is it loose? Would it be loosely in a way that as strategic plans are developed, it can change as time changes with the needs of the community for those ones, or would that have to be new bylaw amendments each time?
Well, and so just to clarify, this is our internal policy. And so the bylaws will remain the same as they are. This policy allows for council to identify what their priorities are. And that can be changed. And so I don't think we've had in my time the opportunity to sit down and actually look at it and say, we would really like to focus on these things. And if that becomes an annual process, whether it's in the fall, we reflect on the year that has just passed and identify how we want to go forward in line with being ahead of the financial planning process, then we have those opportunities to be prepared for what we want to accomplish and move forward with a way to do so.
Thank you.
Mr. Mott, you had something to add?
I was just going to clarify that it is an internal policy and not a bylaw. So Mr. Baker articulated that.
Thank you. And Councillor Steer, did you have a comment or a question?
No, thank you. I think that summed it up very nicely.
I'm just wondering if we can go back to the slide where you actually had the motion or the resolution or. Okay. Yeah, I'll just make a comment now that I'm old enough to say that I remember how hard it was back in, I don't know, Councillor McMaster, you might remember 2011, and alluding to what Councillor Anderson said, there was a real movement within that council to make sure that things became more proactive. And as I recall, that took quite a few years and many meetings, but I may be remembering incorrectly. But the only hesitation I have with this is that based on council priorities, but they're not, we don't list them in any way. So I'm wondering, and I'm hopeful that, I mean, how does that get remembered in the corporate memory? How does that, you know, if we say proactive based on council priorities, I mean, I think that's a very good idea, but I'm just wondering how it's going to be captured. And to Councillor Anderson's point, I appreciated what he said when he said the context and comparisons. I was just reading a document today that spoke about that proactive policy in Tofino. They were speaking about other issues but mostly short-term rentals, I suppose. But you know, how do we keep that capture? How do we keep those priorities sort of front and center for staff when we're not meeting, when the community is watching what's going on? I find it a little bit vague. I'm supportive, but I find the concept a bit vague. So that's from
Through the chair. Staff would prepare a report to council, we believe for the October 11th meeting, with an amended policy and a recommendation that council establish those priorities formally through the financial planning process. So council would have an opportunity each year to formally consider what the bylaw enforcement priorities would be for the upcoming year. And there would be a written record of that would provide bylaw staff with clear direction.
okay. Is there a further comment, Councillor McMaster?
Just a question. You know, these priorities, whatever they are, do you track how much it costs us to be proactive on the various priorities, or is it just thrown into the general bylaw mix? Like, could you say we spent this much enforcing campfires, this much for off-leash dogs, or whatever?
It probably could be, in general terms, figured out how many dollars get spent patrolling for vehicle campers versus how many hours are being spent patrolling beaches during the day for off-leash dogs. In a general sense, up until this year, we have not spent 3 hours a day on the beaches patrolling for off-leash dogs, but that was something that was expressed as a priority for council. So that has now taken place, and so these are where I talk about if we want to do that at the same time as certain other things. If we factor that into the financial planning process, then we can really account for those things and give a good framework of what that might look like. Just based on this much per person, this many hours per day for this type of thing. Those priorities get built into how the day is spent, and so it's pretty easy to identify there's a few hours each day based on patrolling the streets for vehicle camping and those sorts of things, and a few hours on the beach. Most of the summer is 6 hours per night on the beach for evening patrols, those sorts of things. So based on those priorities, we can figure that out. So
the reason I asked for that, because I think it would be a good idea to do it, is, I mean, I think, which doesn't necessarily mean everybody would agree with me, but I think when it comes to enforcement and we're talking about licensing, whether it's business licenses or dog licenses, some of those costs for enforcement should be captured by the business license fee or the dog license fee. So that's why I would like to see those numbers tracked. So that would be a recommendation from me. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Any other comments from others about this? Yeah, I'd like to say, I think that's a good idea. Just thinking back to how the RCMP report back to us. It's quite helpful when they kind of give us an idea of the number of hours of what the issues that they're facing and then how they're going to prioritize. I think that would help us both understand each other's roles a bit better and be more supportive of what's, if there's a bit more of a tracking system associated with it. I think it would give us, I think as council, trying to support community, I think it would give us confidence. And I think, as you mentioned from your end of things, it would be helpful that we're not just, you know, sending people out willy-nilly and wasting a lot of money and time doing things that maybe aren't the highest priority.
there are certain things for sure that we can be quite specific on. I could tell you, not right off the top of my head, obviously, but by running a simple query, I can tell you exactly how many tickets have been written this year. And I can figure out based on that approximately how many minutes per ticket and how many hours have been chewed up, just dealing with parking issues and those sorts of things. Where it gets a little bit tricky is the RCMP may have the ability to say we were tasked to a specific incident and document those times. Our team will spend a half a day out on a patrol and cover all kinds of different things during that patrol. So it may not be able to be as specific, but we can certainly say this many hours equals this many dollars spent on ticket enforcement, this many hours spent patrolling the beaches daytime, this many hours nighttime. We can do those sort of general ones. We have in the past done presentations to council in around the fall as a sort of seasonal wrap up of what the summer looked like, where we've had the total number of campfires over the summer, number of tickets written for that, number of interactions, number of general complaint files for the entire year, which is in the thousands. We can provide some statistics like that for sure in a pretty simple slideshow as we've done in some previous years.
I think that information would be good for the community to know as well, because they find out how much it actually costs to enforce something they think is a high priority. It might not be such a high priority when they realise how much it costs. So.
Good. I think, Councillor.
No, I was gonna say, might be the recommendation.
Yeah, I think if you feel like you've heard our concerns, and I think this idea of a report out in a more general sense, not so, to the hour specific, I think would be really helpful for council going forward. And I think if that was encapsulated, I think most of us could live with that recommendation. Am I right? So please.
May I ask a clarifying question? Our thought process was obviously with the election coming up, we have one more council meeting prior to the election. That moving forward with this recommendation and then having this policy discussion at the next meeting allows the opportunity for the next council to start out with that understanding in place, and therefore we can move forward with all those in mind. So just for my own clarity, if council is to move that recommendation right now, would you like to see this come back for next week? Can't obviously do all the statistical presentations in that in time, that's just not possible, but with this direction specifically.
I would say, can you bring it back for the next council meeting? I believe so. I would support that one.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I would support if Chief Baker's got the time to bring it back to the next council meeting. I would support doing that.
I would also say I support that, and I think it would make sense for any stats and stuff to go with the financial plan, which is when then it allows for that wholesome conversation of what the priorities and stuff are.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson.
And I'm not sure if it needs to be part of the policy, but there should be a communication aspect as well to it that the public can access or be informed of what the council priorities are from year to year as after we go through the financial process. I know that many people were kind of surprised at the level of dog enforcement suddenly increasing this year. And so that was one example of when bylaw priorities shifted and wasn't well understood that was going to happen. So
yeah, good. So communication and reporting back to council, I think, is what we're saying. And following that, I think Councillor Chalmers, you have to read that.
Sure. Only that staff receive permission to proceed with policy amendments that would update language used and clarify complaint or concern driven versus proactive approach to enforcement based on council priorities.
Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. And all in favor? Opposed? No. Motion carried. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. And moving on to item 8.2, short-term rentals. There's a verbal report from Community Services. Is that in person or Zooming? Oh, Zoom. Hello there.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Good afternoon. I apologize for not being there in person today. Feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm actually presenting from home. And I'll also take a minute to apologize in advance in case I happen to have a cough or a sneeze midway through this presentation. But I'll be sharing my screen here to work through a short presentation. So hopefully on the big screens in the council chamber, the short-term rental status fall 22 start of this presentation can be seen. The presentation really pertains to a resolution that was made earlier this year in March of 2022. The following resolution was passed. That council be directed to report back to council, or sorry, that staff be directed to report back to council regarding the short-term rental economy statistics, trends, and available data in Tofino at a future committee of the whole meeting. So this brief verbal presentation attempts to provide an answer to that resolution. So taking a look, this information has been provided by our business license inspector, and just taking a look at the current number of issued short-term rental licenses. And just for clarity, when I say short-term rental licenses, that includes all commercial accommodation licenses that are not for hotels, motels, resorts, those kinds of things, but are allowed the commercial use of a particular accommodation for less than 30 days at a time. Usually these are considered nightly rentals, so bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, guest house, or other temporary accommodation licenses that have been issued. We have a total of 282. Of that total, vacation rental licenses, or these are kind of the strict, when we consider Airbnbs or VRBO, this is kind of typically what comes to mind. Vacation rental licenses make up 73% of that mix. Bed and breakfasts make up 15% of the mix. Temporary accommodations, this is a particular zoning permission that's granted to the Fred Tibbs building and the Ike Landing building. Those are multifamily buildings, condo buildings that can be used for temporary accommodation, nightly rentals. That's 11% of the total issued licenses. And then there's, I believe, 3 guest house licenses that have been issued. So that's only about 1% of the total. Looking at the 5-year history on this chart, to staff, what I think is the most interesting part is that really we haven't seen a large increase in bed and breakfast, guest house, or temporary accommodation licenses issued over the last 5 years. However, the vacation rental licenses, there's about a 56 license increase there. Bed and breakfasts, only about 3 licenses increase between 2017 and 2022. Worth noting that it did jump up to 48 as the highest, and that was in 2018, but we're currently have 42 bed and breakfast licenses issued. Guest house, there was none in 2017. Now there are 3, and temporary accommodation has actually gone down from 34 to 31. Again, in 2018, there was the highest number of temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast licenses, but they've actually gone down since that time. There's a little graph that kind of, more visually plots this information. In general, there's been for the total of short-term rental licenses, there's been a 26% overall increase in the last 5 years. Most of that has been driven by vacation rental increase in vacation rental licenses. So the top 2 lines there, the sort of darker black line shows the total STR licenses, and then the kind of green-orange line directly underneath it shows the vacation rental licenses. And as you can see, they actually somewhat closely mirror each other. As noted, there's little change in the other forms of licenses. So this include bed and breakfast, guest house, and temporary accommodation. But it's been the growth of overall short-term rental licenses has been driven primarily by vacation rental license increases. So taking a look at the locations, somewhat unsurprisingly, the most common street for a short-term rental license is Pacific Rim Highway. That doesn't tell us much, though, in terms of geographic closeness, as that's the longest street in the municipality, or longest road in the municipality, I should say. So all along Pacific Rim Highway, there are 38 licenses. What's a little bit more interesting is kind of the shorter roads. So for example, Lynn Road, Chesterman Beach Road, they kind of run into each other. And between on Lynn Road, there's 25 licenses, and Chesterman Beach Road, there's 18 licenses. So actually a fairly high concentration rate in that one area. Main Street as well has a high number of licenses. It's worth noting, though, that my understanding is that the high number of licenses attributed to Main Street is largely because of the Fred Tibbs building. And then Jensen's Bay Road also has 18 licenses within that one little area. So of the total licenses, 21% are located within in the Chesterman Beach area. So that includes Chesterman Beach Road, Lynn Road, as well as Thornton Crescent and Howard Drive. So within that area, about 21% of the total issued vacation rental licenses are within that area. It's also kind of interesting to note that approximately 53% of the licenses are outside of the village containment boundary. So that's approximately at Industrial Way. So south of Industrial Way, approximately 53% of total licenses are located outside of that area. But what that also means is that about 47% are located within what we consider our downtown area, which is the area where we're currently looking to also develop higher density housing, lower cost housing, those kinds of things. Our OCP really specifies that residential development should be constrained within the village containment boundary. So just interesting to note that there's almost a dead even split between vacation rental licenses issued within the town area or the more downtown area, as well as within the southern Tofino area that's south of Industrial Way. So the highest concentrations within the downtown area are the Fred Tibbs building. Not really a big surprise there. It's a higher density building with nightly rental permissions. Ike Street as well, same sort of situation, and Gibson Heights. There's also a fairly high concentration of vacation rental licenses up Lone Cone and Pfeiffer in that area. Uwood development does have a high density of licenses, but it's worth noting that those are all bed and breakfast licenses. Short-term rentals are actually, or vacation rentals are not permitted within the Uwood neighborhood. However, bed and breakfasts are. It's also worth noting that most of these bed and breakfasts, really do resemble vacation rentals, as opposed to what we would consider a traditional bed and breakfast, where you're staying in someone's spare room and eating breakfast in their living room and those kinds of things. So there's a significant amount of unknown information that may be relevant to council. These kinds of things include vacancy rates and average nightly costs. Protective services staff, led by Chief Baker, have had some initial consultations with the host compliance group. It's the initial software that the District of Tofino started out with in 2016, but has recently, ended our contract with them, and has recently started some conversations with them to see if it would be worth hiring them again or using their services again. They provided some kind of initial, based on their initial kind of data scraping from VRBO, Airbnb, and other listing sites. They estimated that the average nightly cost, and this is not high season or low season, this is just year round for all the units in town, is approximately $390 per night. And that the average, I believe the average kind of yearly gross income for a vacation rental unit is approximately $90,000, which means that the vacancy rate, if you divide 90,000 by 390, you end up at about 230. So it's not out of the question to assume that the most vacation rentals in town are rented, maybe 200 plus nights per year. Again, this depends on the size of the unit, on the location of the unit, on the overall cost. And in some cases, there's actually such a high density that when there's not a lot of demand, for example, in certain winter months, it may not even be worthwhile keeping some of the smaller units open for the cost that they'll actually be receiving for nightly rentals. So again, this is not really very high grade information or very specific nuanced information. However, it does represent some of the information that we may be able to gather working with the host compliance team. I believe they kind of put together an initial budget that's around $11,000. This is maybe a budget question for the upcoming budget year. And something that Protective Services, I believe, will be taking into consideration and maybe bringing forward to the next council as we work through budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So although this isn't directly related to the actual resolution from council, I took the liberty of kind of outlining a few possible regulation or steps to consider for councils. I know this is something that's come up quite a bit recently, and council may be considering both the positive and negative effects of short-term rentals on the community and how to kind of come to terms and balance those sorts of things. So one of the things that really is underpinning all of this is that the zoning bylaw is quite permissive when it comes to vacation rentals, short-term rentals. They're permitted in most residential zones. At least all residential zones that were created up until about 2007, which was when UWID was created. For reference, my understanding is that the last time that vacation rental permissions were added to a zone that didn't already have them, from dating back to the 90s or earlier, was in 2011 with the Fred Tibbs zoning amendment. So we are currently working off a zoning bylaw that dates back to 1997. As we've recently adopted a new OCP that was a bit of a departure from the previous OCP, it's actually quite appropriate to consider an update or a complete rewrite of the zoning bylaw, which is something that the planning department has been thinking about since well before I joined the district. So currently it's scheduled to begin in 2023. It's going to include extensive community consultation, as there's a lot of somewhat outdated language in the current zoning bylaw that doesn't reflect current community needs or desires or goals. It's worth noting, though, that even if we snapped our fingers and said that all vacation rental permissions are no longer present in the zoning bylaw, no zone has those permissions anymore. Every single license holder that currently is out there would have legal nonconforming status under Section 528 of the Local Government Act. So this is just an interesting kind of clarification point. Sometimes you hear in the community people saying, well, we just got to change the zoning and then all these problems are going to go away. That's not really the case. There's provincial legislation that protects current uses, even above and beyond any bylaw changes that council may introduce at this point. So if it's an existing use and council changes the bylaw, that existing use is allowed to continue, of course, under certain conditions. However, those conditions don't have any time frame attached to them. Business licensing is another kind of regulation approach that we've heard talked about, maybe capping the amount of business licenses that can be issued. I don't actually have much information about this. I know it's something that Chief Baker and the rest of the Protective Services Department have also been considering. However, it will likely require some additional legal opinions and in general, the process about how to enact something like that and what the policy might look like is a little bit uncertain. Some other, not really regulations, but maybe policy alternatives would include incentives for other types of development. So this would be, including, a policy for tertiary dwellings, as long as a vacation rental isn't present on the property. Density bonusing approaches, these often are tied into zoning bylaw updates as well. So the goal would be to, use the carrot instead of the stick here and make it, financially more lucrative and maybe a bit more of a viable development option for somebody, instead of using their home as a vacation rental to develop additional density on the home and provide it as a long-term rental. Again, this is some stuff that I don't have a lot of detail for council at this point, but maybe policy worth pursuing in conjunction with zoning bylaw updates. And this last one is a bit of a kind of a floofy, loosey-goosey point, but I do think it is relevant, worth mentioning is, I called it a public relations or marketing campaign, but some way of communicating to the general private property owners to consider how their use of private property does affect the community at large. Right now within the community, that there's, and of course we're set against a kind of a larger economic scheme that really rewards people for commodifying as many aspects of their life as they can. And we've provided zoning permissions for people to do that quite effectively with private housing, but to try to encourage private landowners to look at housing as housing instead of just an investment vehicle, which is typically what we see now in Tofino in many cases. So again, more of a kind of a high level, almost barstool philosophy kind of comment, but it may be something that is worth considering as well moving forward. And I think I'm going to close out the presentation at that point, but happy to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you very much for the presentation and appreciate the work that was put into this. I think it's probably just what we need, and I'm happy to hear council's discussion and comments. Or are there any comments for Mr. Thicke at the moment? Councillor McMaster and then Mayor Law.
Yeah, I appreciated all the numbers. I just wondered, is there any way we can add to those numbers in terms of how many vacation rentals are within a principal residence? How many business licenses are owned by locals versus out of towners or corporations? Because I think that's sort of information is going to be really useful for some of the discussions that will probably happen in the next 6 months.
Thank you for the question through the chair. I believe some of that information may be possible to gather. I think one of the things that I would like to, and I believe that we have the information on, is the typology of vacation rental. So whether it occurs in a suite or in a main house or in a cottage, the sizes, those kinds of things. In terms of who owns them, corporations versus locals versus out of towners, we would kind of have to define who a local is and what an out of towner is. In those cases, many of these houses are owned by people who do come and visit Tofino quite regularly, but when they're not here, they vacation rental their house. And it's, I guess that they are property paying or property tax paying members of the community. So determining, if they're, here for less than a month, does that make them a local or a non-local, or how many, nights they have to sleep in their house in order to do that may be a little bit challenging. And I can work with the business license inspector to try to break some of that information down. In terms of those that are owned by corporations, again, many people do purchase property under a numbered corporation or under a separate sort of thing. I think, again, this is something that I feel I'm not very well educated on, but I'll try to speak to. One useful way of thinking about these things has to do with the application for a homeowner grant. I'm not sure how we would track that specifically, but it may be one way to approach it and say, hey, look, if this person is applying for that homeowner grant on this particular civic address, then maybe we could conclude that this is their primary residence. And even though they might not spend every single night of the year here in Tofino, that they, are using this as their primary residence and considering it, that. And again, it may be that we have to just kind of come up with some definitions and make some general assumptions, but that is something that I could likely work with the business license inspector to hopefully track down that data and maybe report back to council at a later date.
I'll just add, the homeowner grant, that might be null and void for any homes that are worth more than 2 million, the way it's going. Well, I have a vacation rental in Key West. If you need a short-term license, you have to show proof of residency to show it's a principal address. I know there's ways around everything, but your driver's license is supposed to show your principal address. So I think that could be one thing we look at for when people apply for a business license. I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Anyone else like to make have a question maybe to start with and then a comment?
I just actually, Councillor McMaster asked pretty much everything I was going to ask, and Mr. Thicke also added information that I was going to ask as well. So I look forward to seeing some more data. You know, I do appreciate knowing where the bulk of the vacation rentals are. I think that's going to be important going forward. For me, at least, anyway. Just to see if there's even zoning possibilities, you know, restricting vacation rentals in certain zonings may make sense if the ultimate goal is to increase housing. You know, it may work one area but not in another area. For instance, like maybe on Chesterland Beach, it may not actually increase housing. So those are really important stuff for me. Interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Thicke.
Councillor Stewart, do you have a question or?
No question. I think it was, I think Councillor McMaster and Mayor Law pointed out some of the pieces, gaps maybe in the data that we might like to see to help better inform our decisions. But overall, I think it was comprehensive and gave us the types of information I think we'll need to move forward with some of the decisions we'll have to make around this.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, my comments would be that I know that the short-term rentals that use has enabled some local people to be able to afford to build and here. So I think as we look at the question of these numbers and what's the right number for Tofino and what we might do in the future, I think that has to be sort of taken into account as we go forward. I think it's a good idea to sort of keep these numbers current and sort of build on this report. And possibly we might look into ways of changing or improving our business licensing around short-term rentals to facilitate collecting numbers and getting some of the more nuanced levels of uses that Councillor McMaster alluded to, whether it's, you know, a suite or the main house or a cottage or, you know, the different types and levels of use. Also, I think it's important to get some idea of how many are unlicensed and operating. So those are my comments.
Councillor Challenger.
Most of the questions also have been asked. One comment is that I really appreciated some of the possible steps forward, in particular, however viable it may be, to incentivize density for housing, particularly maybe within the Tofino town limits, especially for the downtown core, where that's in the OCP shown as a place for higher density. So I really like that idea. Would be great to see in further reports how that could be done.
Thank you. Maybe just go to Councillor Chalmers. Sorry.
Nothing new to add.
Thank you. And another round of questions.
Just a follow-up question. I did find Councillor Anderson's comments about business licensing forms, maybe requesting some of the information that council has mentioned. And maybe this is just a question maybe for you, Mr. Thicke, or maybe beyond you, but could that be an option? And this is just a question, you don't have to have an answer, but you know, for us and maybe staff, is it an option, a possible option, to change the short-term rental business licensing forms to request some of the information that council is looking for? Like, for instance, you know, is this your primary residence? You know, is this using the majority of the home or the lesser of the two? Stuff like that. That's just something I'm throwing out there as a possibility. It might solve a lot of problems. Getting information that we'd have to pay for.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mayor Law, and through the chair. I don't have a direct answer for that one. In terms of the business licensing forms, I'm not sure if there's any bylaws that would need to be changed. I might look to the Manager of Protective Services to see if he's still in the room, if he has any comments around that. However, that is certainly something that I'd be happy to kind of work with the business license inspector and the Manager of Protective Services to work on whichever kind of bylaws are relevant, and then work on changing those forms. It may also be a bit of a discussion with our legislative services in terms of how we gather and treat personal information, though we do it in many other cases for most application forms, so I don't see any major issues there off the top of my head. I'm not in the room, but if there's any other staff member that would maybe like to comment on that as well, perhaps there's some other information that can be gathered.
Yes, thank you. We have a comment from Ms. Best, I believe.
Thank you, Chair Thicke, and through the chair. Just to respond to that, the business licensing forms have been removed from the bylaw, so those forms can be amended. However, amending a form requesting additional personal information or third-party information for businesses, we would have to undergo a privacy impact assessment to ensure that we're not asking for more information than we're legally entitled to as a local government. So it is a possibility to change it, but it's just going to take some work on a privacy impact assessment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for answering that, at least in part. So, Councillor McMaster, please go ahead.
I think business licensing could be one of our tools, and I discussed this with our CAO as to whether business license for an STR could be restricted to one license per person. And she said she would check into it, but she felt it would be possible to change the business bylaw to that effect. And like I said, there's a way around everything. Like I could have a license, my wife could have a license, but I think it would help curb some of the commercialization of property we're seeing in this town. So that's another thing to discuss. And then finally, for members of council, I don't know if you read the report from UBCM, which came out last June, priorities for action on short-term rentals. And it stresses how local governments are going to be the main tool to get some action on this. And I'd encourage everybody to read that if you haven't already.
Thank you. I might just add my comments to the floor now that everyone's had a chance to say something. Yeah, I do think that this document I reread it, and I think it is a really good working document for us. It as Councillor Anderson said, it addresses the pros and the cons, the benefits and the doubts. And they talk about public impacts such as noise, parking, garbage, disruption. They also speak about the good points in that there are families for whom this allows them to have a home where they can raise a family with some space. It also was given in the document that school groups and sports teams in some places find that an easier way to facilitate their group than perhaps a traditional hotel room. And I think as Councillor Anderson said, I think the problem is in the balance in regulating the STR to enhance the benefits and opportunities that a town or community might realize, but reducing the detrimental effects on housing and long-term livability. And so I think that we need policies that do respond, and we need to consider both, as you mentioned. I think this all began when UBCM this all came up in about to the floor, and many discussions ensued about 2016. And then I think this working document came about as a result of many meetings, 2016, 2017, 2018, before it actually came to fruition in 2021. So I think it's a very broad-based document, and it's very easy to read and understand. And I think some of the ideas in there, one of them, which I'll just mention now, that I thought was really good, that there are communities that have agreements, for example, with third-party licensing, such as Airbnb, where there's no advertising allowed without compliance or without a business license, so compliance to the local bylaws. So I think that's something else we might consider. But I do think that the balance has been perhaps not in the community's favor at this point in time, and I feel that it would be a very worthwhile and strategic, but I think it fulfills one of our strategic priorities, which is not only to build housing, but to protect the housing that we have here in Tofino. So I am a proponent of looking at these regulations and seeing what we can do to just benefit the community. And so I think it's a good discussion. I think it's a good way forward. And I don't think we have any, do we have, there are no resolutions or recommendations going forward from this, because all of this information has just come to us today. Am I right in saying that? Mm-hmm. Right. So if there are no further comments on the 8.2 or questions, we can go on from there. Okay. Very nice. We will. 8.3. We heard about this in our last meeting, council meeting, and we're going to just continue the discussion, I think, today on the BC Rural Health Network membership. And this item was referred from the September 27th, 2022 regular council meeting. So in your packages, we have the slides that were given to us. Or maybe these are new slides. They're kind of a combination. Are they new or are they the same?
They're the same.
They are the same. Okay, thank you. So we have a series of slides. I don't think we're having any presentation about this, but this was brought forward from our September 27th meeting. And I think the question on the table for us going forward is whether we would like to join the BC Rural Health Network and add our voice to that organization. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah, so who would someone like to start off? Councillor McMaster and then Councillor Stewart. Did you have your hand up? Yeah, thank you.
I think we should definitely join, because you just look at the news and health is a topic of conversation, whether it's lack of nurses, doctors or health facilities throughout Canada and especially BC at the moment. So I think we need every opportunity to bring a voice. So I would be fully supportive of supporting this organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Steer.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I concur with Councillor McMaster about the benefits of in this particular group with a rural perspective bringing to the table. Often the conversation is dominated in those metropolitan areas. The one thing I do want to stress, though, I think just by having our name in there is one component of membership. But if we really want to have an effective voice, and I think Tofino does have a solid voice in this area, I do think we should be considering having a much more fulsome participation in this particular group. So it may be a discussion for a later council, but at this point, I certainly support the membership. I think the benefits there are strong. And then maybe a further conversation down the line is what level of participation with the District of Tofino and specifically council like to participate directly in the rural perspective.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make a comment on this? Councillor Anderson?
Well, yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I think municipal participation in this group is probably it's a political statement, really. So we're supporting a lobbying effort towards improved health care healthcare, a lobbying effort to the provincial government and maybe at the federal level as well. And I think that in order for municipal involvement to be really meaningful, it's actually going to take a whole number of municipalities showing their support for it. So I do support joining it, but I also hope that it encourages other municipalities membership as well. And yeah, and I think just as sort of municipalities getting their voice together at UBCM and putting a lobbying effort towards the province, this might be a channel that around the specific issue of healthcare, municipalities' voices will carry, but it will take some numbers, I think, for it to be meaningful through this channel.
Good point. Agree. Meryl, you comment?
Just a quick comment on committees, just a quick question maybe for staff is we do have committees. If we did join this committee and hypothetically had somebody sitting on their board, what is the cost to the district for something like this? Is it negligible?
Through the chair, it really varies from committee to committee. If it's a handful of virtual meetings a few times a year, the cost is minimal. If it involves travel off the island, then of course costs go up with accommodation and per diems and travel and things like that. So the presenters did indicate there were a number of ways that a community could participate other than simply joining. So I think we would have to look to the network to see what ways we could have a councillor participate and what the cost implications may be.
That's a point. I support the effort. So you can't see any drawback personally.
And Councillor Chalmers, did you have any comment?
No, I agree. I think it's still early days with the thing, and as Councillor said, it really needs to grow to really support this, but I don't think there's any downfall to getting in early, supporting it, his voice. But I think as far as more wholesome participation really depends on future council and cost and what that looks like as it grows. So I think that would be sort of a future conversation.
Thanks. I just have one question for you, Councillor Steer, because you sit on the ACRD. I can't remember the name of it, the health network. Do you think that from just where you have sat the last couple of years within that group, would it be is it going to add to joining this group? Will it add to what the work that you and the rest on the Alberni Health Network have been working on, or?
Well, I think I have not been sitting specifically on the Alberni-Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network, but through the ACRD process, I get very, very frequent updates as to that. There is the opportunity for someone from the District of Tofino to sit on the Alberni-Tla-o-qui-aht Health Network. I do think, though, that it is very different in context. It is very regional in its focus. But certainly the information and the data that they collect and that they have and the work that they do would certainly support a lot of the work that, as everyone's seeing here in the initial days of the lobbying efforts of this particular group, they would be able to feed information in that would be very, very positive in moving their agenda forward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I liked what I heard in their presentation, and I like their advocacy role. I also think, I'm not sure when they say we're apolitical, as you said, Councillor Anderson, that's completely true. However, I think that everything we can do to improve our healthcare and healthcare system would be advantageous. And the fact that this is a BC-based organization, I think couldn't hurt. So I think what I've heard around the table is that we're all in support, and knowing that or understanding that, Ms. Best, do you think we could make a simple recommendation whereby we add our voice to, we choose to belong to the BC Rural Health Network?
Through the chair, yes. And just a reminder, this is a committee of the whole, so it'll be the committee recommends to council that to proceed with joining the BC Rural Health Network would just be a sufficient resolution.
Right, so sorry, would you like to speak that? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I something along that lines, but I think it'd be a good idea to ask staff to report back on what participation means, what membership and participation means, or what we might have to do as a result of becoming a member. Would we appoint a counselor to sort of join their meetings, report back to council? Would a staff member be assigned to it? So I think maybe a staff report back on the participation after, or just what membership and participation means.
We have two hands up, Ms. Best and then Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Chair Thicke. Just to clarify, we do have an annual appointment process for council at the end of every year. So this, if it were requiring membership, committee seats would be part of that process. So legislative services could provide that at a later date when we're doing all of the committee appointments for all of council seats.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I do think when I asked that question last meeting, I said, what would be required of us? I think, excuse me, I think something to that effect was given in response, if I'm remembering correctly. So, Councillor Steer, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think you through the chair, Councillor Thicke, that the requirements at this point for membership, I think, was just a straight $50. In the presentation, the actual joining was very straightforward in terms of the initial. If I remember correctly, in reviewing those slides, the initial I think it was a $50 fee to join, and then further participation. That could be something that council has a discussion around, and how much we want to be a participant within the organization. Yeah, I can be corrected though.
Thank you. I think there's heads nodding around the table, so I think we all remember the same thing. Just to keep things simple and moving forward, how do others feel about it? Could we move the recommendation?
I'll move that the committee recommends the council to proceed with applying for membership of the BC Rural Health Network.
Thanks. Mover, have it seconded from Councillor Chalmers. Are there any further questions? Councillor Steer, was that a question?
No, I was just seconding.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor of the motion as read. Any opposed? None. Hearing none, motion passes. So that will come forward on October the 11th. Okay, good. Moving along then, item 9, unfinished business. Do we have unfinished business? Is there any other thing that we need to consider before we have question period, Ms. Best? No? No? Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure because I'm not usually in this role. So we have any opportunities now for question period? Is there anyone signed up for questions to council?
Thank you, Chair Thicke. Currently, we don't have any registrants for the question period, but we do have members of the public in attendance. So I'd like to remind those members, if you would like to pose a question to council, you may do so by using the Q&A function in your Zoom window. So I'll call once. Seeing none, I'm going to call a second time. And calling thrice. And there are no question period submissions.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Seconded by Mayor Law. Favor. Thank you all. End of the meeting today.
Okay.